Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Across the Fence, I'm Fran Stoddard. In any given year, the Vermont legislature discusses and debates more than 500 different bills. Those potential new laws cover a wide range of issues, from changes in criminal justice or environmental law to subjects like charter changes or education funding. Today, our focus is on Vermont legislation and public policy that involves senior Vermonters. As many of you know, the median age in Vermont is one of the oldest in the nation, and we're growing older. By 2030, nearly 30% of Vermonters are projected to be over the age of 65. So for our discussion today, I'm joined by two state representatives who serve on the Human Services Committee. I want to welcome Teresa Wood from the Washington-Chittenden District, which includes Waterbury, Huntington, Bolton, and Buell's-Gore. Also with us is Daniel Noyes from the Lamoille 2 District, which includes Wolcott, Johnson, Hyde Park, and Belvedere. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you for having us, Fran.
So
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you both, and we'll start with Teresa. What are you and your fellow lawmakers doing to plan for this continued aging of Vermont's population?
Well, that's a great question, Fran, because one of the things that is critically important is that we plan. And that's something that has gotten started in the last couple of years, actually. We've been working on this, Representative Noyes and I have been working on this for 3 to 4 years right now. But in 2020, we passed something called the Older Vermonters Act. And that act essentially puts into law what older Vermonters can expect from their state government, can expect from the state of Vermont as a whole, from community service providers. It essentially sort of puts into law a Bill of Rights for Vermonters that ensures that policy matters that affect them will include items such as how older Vermonters can be self-sufficient, how they can receive services in their desired location, how can we provide for the protection and financial security of people, social connectedness, how people connect to our communities, as well as those providers that support older Vermonters. So we set in place a process that state government will use under the direction of the governor's office and the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living to talk to Vermonters about what they want to see and what expectations they have for Vermont as a state that is aging in itself.
Great. And so, Dan, how else will we care for older Vermonters moving forward?
Sure. So one of the initiatives that Teresa and I, as well as our whole committee, have been working on is H153, which is looking at really how we fund our home and community-based providers. So these are agencies like Home Health and Adult Days and the Council on Aging's, and being able to make sure that they have adequate funding in order to be able to provide these services. Also within the Older Vermonters Act, we are trying to really look at how our communities plan for around older Vermonters and having an age-friendly state. So this there's a program called AARP, Age-Friendly State, and really looking at how communities think about their planning and land use around older Vermonters and housing and sidewalks and access to services. And then another thing in the Older Vermonters Act is a self-neglect working group, and really looking to make sure that people are caring for themselves and having access to the services so that they can live independently.
Great. And of course, in the last year and a half, nursing homes and long-term care facilities have certainly been challenged. What is Vermont doing to ensure that these facilities are adequately funded and that the residents are safe and cared for?
That's a great question. Great question, Fran. Nursing homes and other long-term care facilities in the state have faced extraordinary pressure during the last year and a half, and they will frankly continue to do so for for the long term, as we look at the challenges that face long-term care facilities, including shortages in staffing and the ability to find adequate nursing people to fill nursing spots. And one of the things that we have in Vermont, particularly for nursing facilities, Representative Noyes just spoke about other home and community-based services, but in nursing facilities, they have a statutory, state government has a statutory responsibility to provide for a review on an annual basis of nursing home rates, and then periodically adjust those rates for things like the cost of nursing, which usually exceeds the price indexes that are used in calculating that. And I think that the other important thing is that how do we look at the ownership and how are we running these facilities that have vulnerable individuals in them? And in the last year and a half, much of that time was spent away from family and loved ones, so there were not a lot of outside eyes and into these facilities. And so the protection measures are really critical, that we continue to have those, and we look at outside ownership of these facilities and how ownership is transferred and things like that.
Terrific. And also, so many studies have noted that Vermont lacks affordable housing for all segments of the population. What about affordable housing for older Vermonters, Dan?
Yeah, so one of the things we often don't think about is that affordable housing in our village centers really needs to have some of the core core infrastructure needs, water and wastewater. And so, moving forward, we've really got to think about how we invest in making sure that our rural Vermont and our downtowns and village centers have access to wastewater so that the development can be affordable and we can start building in our village centers. This legislative session, we made some good investments, I think 190 million in affordable housing for our communities. And though that's not all going to be for older Vermonters, it definitely will start being able to provide more access to affordable housing. As older Vermonters in rural places age, having access in their village centers where their social connections are is really important. If we, talk about having access at a few towns over, that might not be where their families are. And so there's less likelihood to be able to leave their community and move. And just so we really need to focus on in rural Vermont, just having those access in downtowns, our village centers and neighborhoods, and how that happens. And then I was just reading another statistic that 15% of individuals who are homeless are older Vermonters, and you wouldn't think about that, but that's something that definitely keeps coming up in our committee and in the legislature. Is how do we provide access to housing for these individuals?
Absolutely. And, you talk about village centers and how important those communities are to older Vermonters. Teresa, can you talk a little bit about the roles that older Vermonters have played and continue to play in their communities?
Yeah, sure, Fran. I think one of the things that troubles us, frankly, is when we talk about Vermont's crisis in terms of an aging population, it's put in terms that, frankly, devalue the role that older Vermonters play in our communities, in our families, in our businesses. And the fact that, we can't really change the fact that we do have an aging population, but age does not mean that people do not contribute to their communities. One of the things that we are encouraging, and that frankly some people still need, is to be active in the workforce and to look at older Vermonters as real contributors to the workforce. They lots of times people want to work. We all make social connections through our jobs, and that is something that has, is something that is really important to decrease social isolation for older Vermonters, a problem that they often encounter. And so I think that it's really important that words matter, and talking about older Vermonters and talking about contributions, and stop referring to this as a crisis, and embrace the opportunities that we have for older Vermonters. We're all getting older every single day, and if we're lucky, and we want that. We want to be valued in our communities, and continuing to hear about a crisis just frankly devalues the role of older Vermonters in our communities.
Yeah, well, we're running out of time already. I want to talk a little bit, Dan, about lessons learned about access to food, because I know older Vermonters often, won't talk about it, and it's a problem.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, at the early part, a lot of the congregate meal sites shut down, and people would generally go into the local senior center, and that's where they would meet for a lunch and to get something to eat. And so the Meals on Wheels programs really stepped up, and community members from across Vermont really picked up with the Meals on Wheels programs, and we made greater investments into them to make sure that they had the financial resources to provide the food. And then we also had many volunteers go grocery shopping for people. And we often don't think about it, but this was our vulnerable population during the pandemic. And just being able to make sure that they didn't have to go to the grocery store, that they were fed and had access to food, probably really kept the infection rates down amongst that population. So
Absolutely.
communities really did.
I'm so sorry that we're out of time. I know that there are mental health and substance abuse issues and many other things. So I want to make sure that people know how to contact their representative, because we encourage you to stay involved with issues that matter to you. To find and contact your own state representative, go to the website on your screen. It's legislature.vermont.gov. On this site, you can find search for specific bills and resolutions. I want to thank Representatives Daniel Noyes and Teresa Wood for all the work that you do for everyone, including seniors. And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.